if you see 2020-22, there are zero pro-monarchy rallies happened in Kathmandu or any parts of Nepal. 2023, for the first time, two pro-monarchy rallies were carried. And 2024, 3 increased to 3, and 2025 till date it has reached to 8. But interestingly, if you see the entire political history of South Asia, this is for the first time in the subcontinent where a section of people of a particular Nepal, they have been demanding reversing from republican to monarchical system. And the third sentiment is there, the monarchy, the current monarchical group who have been demanding monarchy in Nepal. The monarchy was basically, they believe that it was abolished as a result of external pressure. There are 6 major drivers of this. Number one, the political instability. Nepal has had 14 governments in 17 years. There have been 13 prime ministers and 20 deputy prime ministers. And there have been rotational government, and the rotational government has limited to 3 leaders. Basically, if you go by the Transparency International data, since 2015, Nepal has not scored more than 50 points. I mean, roughly they have been scoring maximum 34 points out of 100 points in international Transparency International, basically the scoring card. So that means there is a clear-cut misgovernance case because of the political instability. All the former 4 prime ministers of Nepal, they all are framed in corruption charges. Apart from the prime ministers, the ex-finance ministers, foreign ministers, and home minister, current home minister also framed in visit visa case also. So you can imagine kind of the level of corruption and misgovernance in Nepal. Combinedly, you can make out the public frustration because of the failure of the government to deliver governance in Nepal.
Hi, I am Pratim Ranjan Bose, and you are watching Podcast with Pratim, presented by Iravati Research and Communication Center. In this edition, we will discuss Nepal. I have with me Dr. Nihar Nayak, Research Fellow at Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis in New Delhi. Welcome, Nihar.
Thank you, Pratim sir, for hosting me.
As you are aware, IDSA is a defense ministry think tank, and Nihar is a top expert on the Himalayan region. So I am presenting you with the best of the experts. Nihar, these days we are hearing some noise about the restoration of monarchy in Nepal. In March this year, the 77-year-old former monarch King Gyanendra returned to Kathmandu after many years. You can tell us better. There have been some rallies. I mean, I keep reading news about some rallies in Kathmandu as well. So what's happening? Over to you.
Okay, Dada, thank you very much for hosting me again for this important debate. As you mentioned that this year, particularly in 2025, the number of pro-monarchy rallies have gone up in Kathmandu and other parts of Nepal. Why this suddenly, this sudden change in basically political movement, kind of demand for restoration of monarchy in Nepal? Slightly, if I go by data here, if you see 2020-22, there are zero pro-monarchy rallies happened in Kathmandu or any parts of Nepal. 2023, for the first time, two pro-monarchy rallies were carried. And 2024, 3 increased to 3, and 2025 till date it has reached to 8 pro-monarchy rallies, particularly in Kathmandu. And it started on March 9th, when the former king Gyanendra, he returned from Pokhara after staying for over 30 days there. And on his arrival, over 10 to 15,000 monarchists who were gathered in front of the airport, and they received him, by shouting that "Come, King, and save the nation." So why did people make such, basically demand for basically revival of monarchical system in Nepal. So that is the basically what I'm saying, the background. And from March 9th onwards, there is a second biggest rally happened in March 28, and followed by other rallies happened till, I can say, June 2nd was the last rally happened, where the royalists made an assessment and they decided that they will take forward this rally from Kathmandu to district level. So that has been the development so far. The question comes here, why did suddenly this upsurge in basically pro-monarchy rallies in Nepal, or particularly in Kathmandu? If you see that the conflict between the monarchist and the democracy was, it's nothing new in Nepal. If you'll see, I can say it has been there. And if you'll go back to 1950, this has been there from that period of Nepal politics in 1950 onwards, when the monarchy was basically, the Shah dynasty was restored with India's support in 1990, then followed by, there was a panchayat system in 1960, in 1990, there was a multi-party system was introduced. So there has been a lot of competition and basically between this monarchist and royalist. But interestingly, if you see the entire political history of South Asia, this is for the first time in the subcontinent where a section of people of a particular Nepal, they have been demanding reversing from republican to monarchical system. There has been cases across the world, like it happened in Iran, it happened in Spain, and happened in Italy also. Some Central Asian countries also happened, but the first time in subcontinent where people have been demanding from reverse to republic to monarchical system. Why this basically disenchantment? Why the public frustration against the democratic process? Because if you see the political history,
so that's clearly a point, that if you are so why some people, I don't know how much they will be, what is their percentage, but why they are this, I mean, so there must be the experience of democracy, and this is the first year of democracy in first decade of democracy in Nepal. So I think that's where it is important. Please answer.
So why this monarchical sentiment is there? We have to understand a little bit, go to a history of this monarchical basically legacy and the sentiment here. The sentiment, I believe there are three major reasons why this monarchical sentiment is there. Because if you know, if you see, number one, the Nepal political foundation was built on a basically monarchical ideology. Back to 1768, the King Prithviraj Saha had set up Nepal by unifying basically the indigenous groups, regions across the Himalayan region. So that is why it has been basically, it's basically based on basically monarchical kind of ideology, and the monarchy ruled that country for 240 years. So there is a strong legacy, is one factor is there. Second, why the sentiment is there. Number one, if it's the king, particularly all those rulers starting from 1950 onwards, I'm saying, they perceive the demand for democracy in Nepal is a conspiracy against the monarchical system since 1950. So that's one set of sentiment is there. And the third sentiment is there, the monarchy, the current monarchical group who have been demanding monarchy in Nepal, the monarchy was basically, they believe that it was abolished as a result of external pressure. So the monarchy itself and the supporters, they cannot believe that the monarchy could be uprooted in Nepal, because since the monarchy was responsible for formation of that country, so Nepal cannot be ruled other than monarchical system. So that is basically the strong sentiment has been in Nepal is there. It will come to that legacy. If you'll see, monarchy, since you can say 1768, as I said, that it was the unified by the King Prithviraj Saha. So there is a sentiment, and people believe that monarchy is a symbol of national unity, sovereignty, and political stability. Because for the 240 years, it's the monarchy which maintained the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and also responsible for international recognition as an independent country, despite there is a colonial legacy in the subcontinent. So Nepal was the only country which has remained away from this colonial rule in this subcontinent, and they continued as also Hindu Rashtra, Hindu country also. They maintained that the purity because India couldn't maintain that because he adopted secularism. And another most important part of this monarchical legacy was basically the king was revered as an incarnation of Vishnu. So that has been basically the major and the legacy is there. And the monarchy also has a pillar of prosperity and economic growth. But it is not the only legacy. There are also, in contrast, there are other views on the monarchical legacy in Nepal also, like for the indigenous groups, Madhesis, and the democracies. The monarchy is basically responsible for basically dismantling of basically the indigenous culture and indigenous economy. And at the same time, for the Madhesis and the Dalits and backward caste, they believe that the monarchy asserted basically cultural unity through its program of like one king, one dress, and one language. At the same time, also they believe that this marginalized group people, they believe that basically the monarchy discouraged democracy and exerted authoritarian tendencies since 1950, and also it was responsible for socio-economic political inequality in the society. So that is the reason in 2008 the monarchy was abolished, and 2015 Nepal adopted new constitution which basically declared Nepal as a republic, federalism, secular state. So that has been there. And since 2015 onwards, the monarchists have been demanding that they have been demanding that the monarchy should be restored, and it should be a constitutional monarchy, re-establishment of the Hindu Rashtra, abolition of the federal structure, and obviously for a better governance system. So these are the major four demands they have been doing. If that has been the case since 2015, then why sudden upsurge in 2025? What are the major reasons or the drivers of this? Basically, the revival of monarchical sentiment in Nepal in 2025 only. As I said, only 2022, there are only 2 cases. So there are 6 major drivers of this. Number 1, the political instability. I will see since the first, after promulgation of the constitution in 2015, the first election was conducted in 2017, and it was basically a left government. They ruled. First government was formed by the KP Sharma Oli, which is a CPN UML. It's a leftist government was there in the Kathmandu. Since 2017, or so you can say, we can roughly go a little bit back. You can say that 2008 when the interim constitution was formed. Nepal has had 14 governments in 17 years. There have been 13 prime ministers and 20 deputy prime ministers. And there have been rotational government, and the rotational government has limited to 3 leaders. One is the Sherbahadur Deva, KP Sharma Oli, and Prachanda. So that's a clear case of basically the public frustration because of the rotation basis government and political instability. Number 2, the corruption. I feel
it's an interesting case actually. We often refer Pakistan, where no prime minister can complete term.
Yeah.
But Nepal is an example next to us, where it's not military, but the politics itself doesn't allow each other to complete term or a smooth transition.
Yes. So the second driver one is basically the corruption issue. Why I'm saying the corruption issue, basically, if you go by the Transparency International data, since 2015, Nepal has not scored more than 50 points. I mean, roughly they have been scoring maximum 34 points out of 100 points in international Transparency International, basically the scoring card. So that means there is a clear-cut misgovernance case because of the political instability in Nepal. Apart from that, if you the major scams, and since 2000, I can say 2006, Sherbahadur Deva, he is a 4 times Prime Minister of Nepal. There are scams and corruption cases against him. That's a wide body aircraft case.
Just, if I may stop you here, is that recently the former Prime Minister, there has been a corruption case against the former Prime Minister. There was a lot of hullabaloo in national media about it. That probably this is the first time a former Prime Minister has been facing such a charge. There are 2 interesting things about it, is that he is from the current Prime Minister's party, that is the Communist Party, CPN-UML, and that so that makes it pretty that first he is the first former Prime Minister. Second, he is from the same party. So is there a kind of what is the politics behind it, or whether a correction is coming in the system? We all know that the corruption, incidence of corruption is very high in Nepal. I mean, in public life, you can just understand it if you be there.
No, there are slightly one. But the current the corruption charges framed against the ex Prime Minister Madhav Kumar Nepal. He is no more with the CPN-UML party, the current ruling party. Okay. He dissented from the party in 2017 and formed a unified socialist party. So he has been basically a challenger, basically a rival of the KP Sharma Oli in that CPN-UML party.
So it is a case of political rivalry, you say?
Basically, this is a political rivalry. So because basically this is a basically tactics from the this is the what Madhav Kumar Nepal he has been and his party members have been making statement that this is a conspiracy, is a design by the current Prime Minister basically to defame the ex Madhav Kumar Nepal, who has been as well as a major challenger to his basic leadership for the last more than 2 decades in Nepal political history. So he believes that this is a political design basically from the Oli side.
So you mean that it has nothing to do with the wider issues that you are maintaining about scams and etc.? You are referring?
No, this is not for the first time the only Prime Minister, ex-Prime Minister has been framed. If you'll see, as I said, ex-Prime Minister Sarbahadur Deuba, even the current Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli, there are also charges of like corruption charges for the Giri Bandhu tea estate case also. I mean, the former Prime Minister Prachanda also, there are 2 cases against him. One is the NCL tax issue and also Maoist cantonment misuse fund issue also. So if you'll see roughly, all the former 4 Prime Ministers of Nepal, they all are framed in corruption charges. Apart from the Prime Ministers, the ex-finance ministers, foreign ministers, and Home Minister, current Home Minister also framed in visit visa case also. So you can imagine kind of the level of corruption and misgovernance in Nepal has been happening for the last 1 decade. Apart from that, if you'll say, since February 2023, 17 demonstrations are carried by various groups against government policies. So you can make out the level of the misgovernance happening in Nepal. And in making the entire thing the worst, Nepal is listed in the FATF grey list in 2025 also. So combinedly, you can make out the public frustration because of the failure of the government to deliver governance in Nepal. And most importantly, the economic crisis. If you see the inflation rate has been 7.41% average throughout the year. Unemployment is 2.6%.
That's an interesting point. Of course, for Nepal is the only country in the region which have done or spoke or done so much for democracy, for constitution and other things. We hear a lot of democracy debates from Nepal. There has not been a case of any army intervention, etc. in Nepal. But it is economically a failed state. Of all the states I am referring to, if I include for last 2 decades, the Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, everyone had periods of very good runs or good goings. Everyone had some period, 4 years, 5 years. Bangladesh had a 10-year long growth boom. But Nepal is one country where the average growth rate is moving around 2%, which is just abysmal. So please go ahead and explain with with democracy why things are failing and on the economic front, and how serious is the issue.
No, obviously, is the one of the major factors basically the frequent government changes in Nepal. If you see, as I said that since 2008, the country has witnessed 14 governments, and the same leaders, they have been actually reappearing as the prime minister of that country after maybe 6 months or maybe 9 months. So the rotation government and the political instability is major factor, and only the coalition partner changes but the leaders remain almost same. And as the coalition formation changes, the government policy also changes also. That is
So
one of the
that
reasons
was my
where,
point, because we also see very frequent change of prime minister in some of
yeah,
the developed countries as well. For example, Japan,
yeah,
you'll see frequent change of prime ministers. But
yeah.
it doesn't matter as long as the policy consistency is maintained. So I believe that is where things are going wrong in Nepal, that every prime minister comes for 1 year, 1.5, or whatever time, and then they change the policies. Is that the case?
That is the only case. I think the major reason is why I'm saying while I interacting with some of the investors, Indian investors in Nepal. I mean, when they discuss with me, they always express their concern about the frequent government changes in Kathmandu, and they don't feel basically invest in Nepal market, because as the government changes, the policy changes happens. So that is why one of the reason, if you see, the Nepal is receiving very low amount of FDI throughout the year, because the investors, they don't have no very much confidence in the political structure in Nepal at this moment, because they don't know how the government will be changed the next 6 months time. So that is the major contribution, I think, contributing factor of basically the poor development issues in Nepal, and also economic crisis in Nepal at this moment. So the
Nihar,
government instability is
you
the
had
major
been
factor.
talking about some number of people living this country every day. And Nepal is extremely populous when we consider the small strip of land. Bhutan is not populous, but Nepal is populous. And also we heard during that Ukraine war that, Nepalis are joining the Wagner's army. So it is a very young country. The age mix is pretty young. Economic crisis is, you can tell more about the economic crisis, and on top of that, it's young. So how serious, if it is not addressed, it can turn into a serious problem for the region. Please go ahead.
Yes, if you see over a period of time, if you see before, when monarchical system was there, I mean, before, I can say 2006, the political leaders had an basically excuse to basically blame that monarchy is responsible for political instability. Because of political instability, it has been affecting the development, and I mean, obviously, the formulation of the policies. So, but in the post-monarchy period, when the monarchy is no more there, still the performance of the elected government has been very much basically very much unsatisfactory, and that's the reason the public frustration is very much high. And not only that, many of these leaders, those who are indulged in scams and corruptions, no serious actions are taken against them. The first action has been taken against the Madhav Kumar Nepal, but other ex-prime ministers, still they are no very, I mean, they are roaming free, and there are hardly any kind of no action taken against them. So that is the reason actually. That is where the monarchy, and for the first time, if you'll see, the ex-king Gyanendra, he started reappearing visiting different parts of the Nepal starting from the 2023 onwards. During their visits and different religious sites and religious institutions of Nepal across the country, he started meeting people, and people started sharing their frustration about like how they are suffering economically, how they are suffering on the governance wise, how the infrastructure is missing, how there is unemployment issues, why the agricultural production has been gone down, industrial production has gone down. So they started sharing their concerns to the king, and the king projected them as an alternative to the democracy for them. So that is why the monarchical people, they started, this is the perfect time to go for the basically revival of, demand for revival of constitutional monarchy in Nepal. And apart from the domestic
How
building,
serious is the economic issues, Nihar?
the economic issues, I think, quite serious, because you see the consumer, particularly if you see as I said, inflation is very high, but
Inflation is high. That is one side.
high. But if you
Unemployment
see
is
the economy, it is not basically a tax-based, basically tax-based economy. Basically, whatever there are two major revenue earning sector. One is obviously the remittance is quite high. It is more than 30% of the GDP actually, if you can say that entire economy. And whatever the government policy has said that the government is getting whatever customs the tariff they get, whatever the income revenue generated from the import, that is the major sources of the government's revenue earning sector actually sources. So there is a serious structural problem. I think the Nepal needs to address all those issues. And I think you see the banks, they have sufficient money, but people are not taking any loan from the bank because the industrial production is very low, and the labor cost is very
They
high
failed
also.
to reform. They failed to reform. They failed to. There are lots of ones of. I researched a lot on the economic side, and what I found is that the banks have. See, it's a small economy, so you are not allowing banks to invest in India. There are loads of very restrictive practices also. I believe these are also one of the problems. And they have too many banks.
Yeah, so the because as I said, bank has loan, but people they don't have any confidence to take loan from bank because they have not confidence in the Nepali market whether they can repay that loan amount. So that when the major industrialists or the business houses, they don't take any loan from the bank. So bank is forced to reduce the basically the interest rates. So that no basically to basically attract more customers to take loan from the bank.
How dependent they are on employment abroad?
Employment?
How many people, or what is the kind of rush to go out of Nepal?
I think as of the labor ministry labor data, I think till last month data it says that in an average 1,700 people are leaving that country for no job in other countries.
Every day?
1,700 people. So that is quite strong.
It is 1,700 per month or every day?
Per day.
My God.
1,700 youths. I mean, that too, people are just immediately after completing their 10th and 12th exams. They don't go for higher education. They straight away get their passport done and they seek a employment certificate from the labor ministry and they go for apply for job in other countries. So the issue is unemployment is quite serious in Nepal.
So that takes us to the end of the discussion. Overall, Nihar, we don't have time. So very quickly, how this is the first decade of full democracy, 2 5-year terms. In their constitution, the full the election will be held only after 5 years. I think in Nepalese constitution, there cannot be a midterm election, right?
After full 5 years.
After 5 years.
Yes.
Right. So we saw democracy for one full decade. Do you see any positive side in the story? I mean, are they trying to come back, or this country has been languishing, suffering from low growth and all the problems that you said for too long? So do you see any attempt? There is a government, this government will, I think Oli is supposed to hand over power to Sher Bahadur Deva.
Yes.
Do you think it will be smooth, or once again they will just try to hang on to power, and then there will be another coalition, some kind of another political uncertainty? What is your expectation?
I believe that so far both the leaders, like the top leaders, the coalition partners leaders like Sher Bahadur Deva, who is heading Nepali Congress, and KP Sharma Oli heading CPN-UML, they are sounding very positive. And at the same time, there are a lot of pressure on the Sher Bahadur Deva from the second rank leaders of the party that this coalition government has been failed to basically perform as they expected. So the public frustration is high. That is the reason the monarchical sentiment is also gone off because of the last over a year. So they have been demanding that the Nepali Congress should withdraw its support from the current CPN-UML. But interestingly, both the leaders like Sarvadip Devan, they are very much confident. They don't think that the public anger or the frustration of the rising monarchical sentiment in Nepal is not because of the misgovernance. They believe that this is because of the external, kind of design, external forces influence that has been working behind this, basically growth of monarchical sentiment in Kathmandu. But coming to that, that your question regarding the whether KP Sharma Oli will hand over power after 9 months as per the agreement between two coalition partners. I believe that if the government continues till that point of time, then definitely will hand over. But here there is a case, there are a lot of political interpretation here, that recently that ex-president of the former president of Nepal, who was basically member of CPN UML, she visited Beijing, and during her Beijing visit, the Chinese leaders, they suggested her to basically form a left unit government in Kathmandu instead of basically banking on basically Nepali Congress and having a kind of socialist and communist government in Kathmandu. So there is a strong, I think, serious effort, certain sections in the UML and the Maoist side, that the left government should, both the left parties should come together and they should form a government. And perhaps I believe that only if that happens, only may not hand over power to Deva as agreed as per the coalition understanding. So I believe that maybe before next year, there could be a left unity government in Kathmandu. Possibilities are very high. So only may not, because there are a lot of challenges to the only inside the party. Because recently, if you'll see, one of the senior leader, Ishwar Pokhrel, he challenged Oli's leadership directly over the age issue, because as per the party rules and the provision, the senior leaders should not take any major position in the party or constitutional position in the party after one's completion of 70 years. But Oli is already 74 years. So there are a lot of pressure on him to hand over power to second rank leaders. And there are also
so you mean that there are issues within party, there are issues outside party. So
yes,
and there are two ways to look at it. One is that despite Chinese influence, the country remained as unstable as it was.
yes.
And on the other hand, about the experience with democracy so far in terms of its performance has not been up to the mark. That is what you are saying.
Democracy obviously has not been performing well because obviously there are like a tussle between political leaders, intra-party, inter-party. A lot of competition is there.
The political. So we are at the end of the podcast. So there are intra-party and inter-party issues. And one thing you said about they think these political parties think that it is because of the outside influence. But at the same time, I think we can discuss it sometime later or in some other forum, that they invite the influence also. That is a case, probably.
No,
because this influence is a source of huge dividend in the entire neighborhood. We all know the rivalry between the powers is a source of brings huge dividend to the political systems. Thank you, Nihar. We don't have time anymore. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Pratim sir. Namaste. Thank you.